So I want to kick off with a question that we got early on in this webinar series, and that's about the backdrop of COVID and how many folks were asking questions about what you two are doing to try to improve your immune resilience. So I want to start first with Dr. Monti. What helps you keep your immune system functioning in an optimal way?
Important question, and thank you, Dr. Gottfried, for doing such an amazing job with these webinars throughout. I hear nothing but wonderful things about you all the time from people who I know that come on to these, and it's just really been a thrill to do these overall. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for now this 5th one. And if people really want 1 or 2 more, we might be able to arrange it, so let us know that as well. You know, in regard to resiliency during COVID, the answer is the same when we're talking about resiliency during any difficult times. And we are constantly faced with difficult times. And some of us have different seasons of our life where things are more difficult than others. And this is something that is normal and we should be prepared for, because we never know what's going to roll around. None of us was really expecting COVID, but I think those of us who were in a more resilient state weathered the storm a little better so far. And that resilient state has a lot of variables. One of them, and a very important one of them, is being rested enough. And we've talked a little bit about sleep, and getting a restful night's sleep consistently is important for immune function, inflammation, and so many other things. We know that health outcomes rely on having good sleep, and that people who don't have it have a harder time. So this is an important one. The kind of diet that we talk about in Tapestry of Health, which is the kind of diet we talk about in integrative medicine and at the Marcus Institute, is important because it's all about maximizing resilience so that whatever comes your way, you're in a better nutritional state. And we really focus on a plant-based, nutrient-dense, moderate calorie diet. And the calories can be modified based upon who you are. But the most important thing is that we're getting those nutrient-dense foods in our diet so that we can be more thoughtful and selective about what supplements that we need. Because people, and I see some of the questions, ask about supplements, and those products, you know, have a role in integrative medicine. Sometimes we need things beyond what we get in the diet, but they don't replace the diet. And when we're talking about resiliency, we need that good, strong, foundational, integrative diet that we talk about. And I know that you talk about, Dr. Gottfried, in your books as well. And then beyond that, for this period of COVID, we wanted to make sure, and Dr. Bazzan and I, you know, we talked about this, you know, together because we also talked to our patients about it, but the same thing that I did, that I told my family members to do, and that Dr. Bazzan talked to his family members and patients about, and that we talked about on our website and in our blog posts, are to make sure that we had enough of the basic nutrients that we may not get from our diet. And one of those you alluded to before when talking about gut health is vitamin D. Vitamin D is important for a lot of things, and we know that it's important for respiratory health as well. And so it was important for us to underscore that, to make sure that people had adequate vitamin D levels. We also encouraged people to make sure they were getting enough vitamin C, and even taking a little extra vitamin C during these times. Vitamin C is important for immune function, for activating some of the immune cells, such as the lymphocytes in the body. And having a sufficient amount has been shown to be important for other types of infectious diseases. So we thought that it was just prudent, again, not proven, but prudent to do so for COVID. And in fact, I do have a clinical trial in the hospital right now using high-dose vitamin C infused for patients who come in with COVID, and we're assessing if that does give people an immune advantage. So there was enough plausibility behind the concept to do the clinical trial and get the IRB approval and those things. So when it comes to, you know, what extra nutrients make sense, that's one of the ones that really jumped out for me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Monti. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire a little
Okay.
bit. So I'm curious what you've changed. So I know you take really good care of yourself. I want to follow up on some of these points you made about rest, about food, and about supplements. And I want to know what's changed since before COVID. Are you taking more vitamin D? Are you tracking your sleep in a different way? Like, how do you determine that your rest is restorative?
Yeah.
I'm going to get you to I'm trying to get you to talk about yourself.
Yeah, great. And I'm glad you actually phrased the question that way, because it made me think about myself. And when I do that, it makes me think about the things that I tell other people, because when I discover it for myself, I'm like, one of the things I noticed for myself, and then I knew it when I was talking to patients, which a lot of that was virtual during periods of time of COVID, which had its pluses and minuses, but it was what it was. I'm happy that we're getting a little bit more back into face-to-face appointments with masks, of course. But one of the things that I noticed and that surprised me was that I was feeling the tension and the anxiety of the time. And I'm somebody who will usually deny that I am. And no, it's not bothering me. I have it under control. It's fine. But I was feeling it. I was feeling it in my body. And it made me more thoughtful about doing some of the stress reduction things that we've talked about in the other webinars. It made me more mindful about being mindful and to do some of those mindfulness exercises. I also realized that I needed a little bit more rest, because the kinds of things that I was dealing with every day were heavy. I mean, you know, we were fortunate in the Philadelphia area to not have a huge amount of COVID cases, but we still had enough COVID cases that, you know, people were coming into the hospital. We were seeing people in the hospital. People I knew were being hospitalized. People were dying. And that is a stressful thing. And I could feel the stress of that. That required me to be more thoughtful about getting enough rest, enough sleep, but also doing some of those other things to sort of break away from the day, to be mindful at different times during the day. And also because gyms were closed, to start to be creative about how am I getting enough physical activity? Because the physical activity is really important for navigating stress and actually keeping your resilience in its best state. So what kind of changes did I make? I ordered all kinds of things on Amazon, you know, exercise bands and things to do sort of push-ups with. Created, dead hangs from this little, ledge in my apartment. And so, you know, the things that I do might be different than what other people like to do. I know people sort of finally invested in that yoga mat that they were always going to get because theirs was all, ratty from dragging it around to classes. So they felt like they had something to kind of get back into the groove of it. And I encouraged other people too, like right now, we're feeling anxious and stressed. That causes us to sort of hunker down and not be as active. But it's also a time to make sure that you're moving that body around and doing what you need to be doing so that you can keep your resilience in the best possible state. So those were the kinds of things that I did to sort of weather the storm. And it felt like a storm. I felt the stress of it like other people did. I was very busy. In fact, I was even more busy in some ways. It was like a rush to design that clinical trial to get it into the hospital, going through the approvals. And I felt like there was so much riding on it because I wanted to have that thing in the hospital to help people. And so there was lots of stresses, and people had enormous stresses. And there were people who had much more stress than I did because they had family members in the ICU and things like that. But those were the things that I did to weather the storm, and I imparted some of that to the people that I was dealing with.